smugglers. We don't even know how many of these kids don't make it and may have been waylaid into sex trafficking or killed because they fell off a train. We have no way of tracking that.
That President Obama sitting down with ABC's George Stephanopoulos in an exclusive interview. Ann Compton, ABC News White House correspondent, you had a chance to watch that interview. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. George Stephanopoulos takes the president kind of around the globe on questions. The first time the president's been asked about those tens of thousands of children flooding in over the southern border in Texas. And his message to parents in Central America, very clear: don't send your kids to the United States. They will not be allowed to stay. But, McGraw, the problem for the president is they're not sending those kids back, at least not quickly, because they have a legal process and jammed immigration courts. And the president really very kind of darkly warns the parents, what if your kids never make it to the United States? What if they don't make it back again? He says it's way too dangerous.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. That is a delicate situation, that being one of them. Did he mention, let's talk about some of the other things that George Stephanopoulos touched on. First, what about John Boehner wanting to sue the president?
President Obama calls it a stunt, and with expressing considerable frustration, says that Speaker Boehner, he has told Speaker Boehner, if you don't like me using executive orders, sit down and work on some legislation that would actually make it all the way through Congress. As you know, the House, controlled by Republicans, has passed dozens of bills on the economy, on taxes, on spending. None of them are acceptable to the Democrats. The president's proposals on minimum wage and on some government spending, not acceptable to Republicans. But in this town, McGraw, nobody is willing to sit down with the other side.
Yeah. Did he mention at all the Supreme Court's ruling about the recess appointments?
You know, that happened just earlier in the day, and the president can't be surprised. But it stems, his use of the recess appointment process is exactly the same roots as why he signs his executive orders. If the president complains so often that his nominations, not just for ambassadors or judgeships or cabinet members, but for jobs within the executive branch, Congress, the Senate sits on them, doesn't move them, sometimes never votes at all. Out of frustration, he tried to get these 3 labor board members in when the Senate was out of session just for a couple of hours. And that's what the Supreme Court said was no way. But Congress can manage its schedule, especially if it's managed by the other party, can manage its schedule so that a president would never even have a recess in which he could make those appointments. And there we get back to the core issue here, and the one that the president expressed such frustration with yesterday, it really getting under his skin, the gridlock, the bitterness here in Washington.
Sounds like me when I used to argue with my sisters when I was 10 years old.
Well, and there are much higher things at stake here. The president told the crowd, a very, very upbeat, very supportive campaign crowd yesterday, that he feels like a bear who breaks loose. And he said he loves being outside of Washington. He's going to do all sorts of unexpected stops. Yesterday, stopped at ice cream, went to a restaurant for lunch. One thing he does tell George Stephanopoulos he can't do, and he regrets it. His daughter Malia's in California. She's about to turn 16. She's looking at college campuses, something a father can take his daughter to do, but a president can't.
Yeah, good point. What about Iraq? Did he talk much on that?
You bet he did. And he feels that the country remains under, the United States remains under such risk of attack. And when George Stephanopoulos read to him his own words years ago saying, you've got to bring the American public in support of what you're doing in foreign affairs, the president said now he does not have to have U.S. support on everything, which, of course, right now he does not have. He says it's important that he takes these actions in Iraq, in Syria, in the Middle East to keep America safe. And yesterday, just as the president was sitting down to this interview, the White House announced for the first time he is going to ask for $500 million to arm some of the Syrian rebels, something he had resisted.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's start where we finished, Ann Compton, and that is with those children being housed coming up from the border. What did he say? What's the end game? I mean, ultimately, are those children going to be sent back?
Absolutely, he says they will be sent back. That there is no provision under U.S. law where these new arrivals would be able to come in. He said his exact words: "Do not send your children to the borders. If they do make it, they'll get sent back. More importantly, they may not make it." He has asked for more judges, more legal help along the border, more detention facilities, because for little children with no adults with them, the U.S. isn't going to just pop them on the next plane back to Tegucigalpa. They're going to put them in detention centers, sometimes in foster homes, until the kids can be brought before an immigration judge. Those courts so backed up that it could be months, and of course some kids may never show up at the court.
Yeah, and you don't want an unsupervised kid in some detention center for months on end waiting for his court date.
That's right.
Yeah, Ann Compton, ABC News White House correspondent, talking about the exclusive George Stephanopoulos interview with President Obama on ABC. Ann, thanks for checking in. Have a good weekend.
And you too, McGraw. Thank you.
7:58 here at Big 550.